I think we're there.
Yay! Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Anthony's supposed to be streaming this on IG Live. So
Okay.
it's all on multiple platforms. And you know what? I'm actually going to see if I could stream this to Facebook while I have you.
It's a little bit.
Okay, cool. So I'm sharing this on my timeline. Can you still see me?
Yep. See you and hear you.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining me on Tea with the Trades episode. I think this is 4.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I think we're waiting for a few more people to join, but I figured before we did that, show me the Negroni.
So I actually changed it up a little bit on you. So I'm actually drinking a bowl of a deer. It's basically, it's a Negroni, but instead of gin, it's with bourbon.
Nice. I don't think I've ever had one actually. So is that do you have an orange wedge in there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Nice. You're so fancy.
That's right. Gotta get creative in these times, you know?
I know. See, I don't know. Anthony and I haven't been well, I shouldn't say I haven't been drinking heavily. If I have wine, my whole day is over. So it's a little touch and go with alcohol.
Yeah. Some days different though.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well,
I have my tea though too, just so you know.
You have your what? Oh, your tea. Okay. What tea are you? I didn't take you to, are you a tea drinker?
I'm a chamomile drinker to help me go to sleep.
Nice.
But this is not chamomile. I don't even know what this is, to be honest with you. I forgot already.
Usually I give everybody like a little packet, but I figured since you were having Negroni, I'll just send something to you separately. You are around the corner from me, so.
I will drink it. I do like tea, but Sunday afternoon, I feel like I need a cocktail. So cocktail and a tea, but I will take your tea.
That is fair. Okay. I'll drop it off next time I see your wife, actually, because she walked past my house, the other day when I harassed you about your landscaping.
Yep, I heard.
Nice. All right. So I want to just kind of dive into this because there's a ton of questions that I have. And I feel like the architect's role on a team has often been like one of the first things that people always ask me as a designer is, how do I work with an architect? Do I include an architect? Do I involve an architect? And you guys also do design and construction. So I think hearing from you would be interesting as to when does someone include an architect on a project? And maybe that answer is a little bit different when it comes to a new build versus a remodel or a renovation. So I'd love your thoughts on that first question.
Sure. So when is an architect needed? I would say really it depends on the client's expectations. So really it could be anything from something really small as replacing windows on your home to an addition. And what I mean by that is, you know, for example, let's say you have a house built in 1910, 1920, and, you know, at some point the previous homeowner in the 60s or 70s removed the windows and, you know, you've got no muttons on your windows, but now you want to bring the historical character back to the home. Mm-hmm. So, you know, maybe a typical homeowner doesn't know what the proper light proportions are of that window. So as simple as hiring an architect as a consultant to select the window and the light patterns and the right proportions for the windows. You know, a big pet peeve of mine, and I see this all over the place, is, you know, in architects, you know, one of the biggest things is scale and proportion, right? So for proportion for windows, you know, a 3-foot window might have a 3-wide mutton grill, but then it could be right next to a 1-foot or a 2-foot window, and it should not have a 3-wide light pattern. It should be proportioned, not based on 3 wide. Mm-hmm. But if a typical homeowner maybe just goes to a window showroom or anybody, and, you know, there's no architectural design really put into that window selection, it could go wrong. So as simple as that, you could hire an architect. So as simple as, you know, or the next level, I guess, of a renovation, you know, you don't need an architect for siding replacing or, you know, some basic interior renovations, but it depends on the level of design and planning that you want. Obviously, you know, in an ideal world, you hire an architect to facilitate, put a team together of, you know, designers, contractors, and you kind of bring everything together in the sense of, you know, if it's just a renovation, you know, if it's matching trim, you know, then that's the scope of the architect might be a lot simpler. But if you want to change or alter the interior of the home, then it becomes more of an architectural interior service of,
Yeah.
a new trim package to match, I'm sorry, not match, but to change, the architecture, if you will. And
Hmm.
obviously, when it gets a little bit more straightforward, when it's an addition or a new home, it's pretty obvious. You need an architect for structural and many other purposes, but
Right.
really all those things I already mentioned, down to the window and the light patterns to the interior trim, is still something the architect will do on an addition or a new construction home. Um, so it's more work on a new home or addition, but um, so yeah, I guess it depends on the level of design you're really looking for. So I think you always need an architect.
Yeah. Says the architect.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good point. And Sarah was laughing because Anthony is like slowly walking around because we're in the kitchens. I don't know if anybody could see.
What's up, Tony?
I asked him to stream on IG, so he was upstairs setting all of that up.
So it's on a different computer.
Yeah, so we set it up on a
Oh,
computer. I was having issues with IG, and I just thought Zoom was better if people really want to see. So we have let me admit a few people in the waiting room. Just a better discussion, easier if people have questions, send them through in the chat. But this is often a question I get asked a lot. Same thing with estimates we did last week, and IG just wouldn't cooperate. And I just think this is a really important topic. So that's why we're on Zoom. So speaking of, because you had said obviously the difference between, doing windows, for example, which could be considered a small project versus obviously your renovations, new builds, that's obvious. Anthony and I didn't use your full services for the porch renovation, which, looking back was probably the dumbest thing we didn't do because as easily as I think, what I had originally thought of as it's just a porch reno, we're just kind of using what's existing. What we didn't realize was that we were going to have a lot of structural issues. So we have an old home and there was really no proper footings, and we had to kind of go through this whole framing exercise. And it would have been a lot easier if we had your plans to kind of say where footings were going to go, and how that structure underneath the porch was going to look. So what's a way that maybe someone who is planning a renovation could start to identify, maybe there's areas of the renovation where they could use your expertise versus other areas?
sorry, Jaclyn, I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't?
Oh, there we go. It's better. I got a phone call, and then when I got the phone call, I hit decline, but then the volume went off. I'm so sorry. I got you back. So you were saying your renovation, you didn't hire an architect or myself for it.
We just use your conceptual drawings,
Yeah.
but we could have used like the footing plans, for example. So I don't think like that wasn't something that I thought about. I just figured, oh, we know what it's supposed to look like, but not realizing that someone needed directions in terms of the framing underneath the porch to support it. So do you have any examples of that where maybe you had a client who didn't think they needed an architect and then ended up having to call you to kind of deal with those types of questions for framers or contractors and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. So what's interesting about that is, like as you said, I'm a design builder. So some people might call me thinking that I'm just a contractor, just a builder, and say, all right, when can you start? And I'll say, well, we have to do the plans first, the design, and they're just like, oh, you need plans? I'm like, well, yeah, like even if I am the builder, like I still need something to say, this footing needs to go, 6 foot off here, and it needs to be centered on this window, and et cetera. So, the greatest builders still need something that is thought out and has a purpose and dimensions. Really is the important dimensions, and those dimensions are leading to the design intent. So it's all a design intent, but to execute a design intent correctly, you need a lot of information.
So what is some of that like information that's included in the plans? Because for me, like they were looking for framing documents and how things would be framed. So what would be included in some of those plans that would help, a contractor, for example, figure out what they're doing?
So from the start, the basic is you start with footings, right? Like you said. So our foundation plan would show center lines of footings so that the excavator knows, he has his dimension lines, how he has to come off of the house. I'm using your project as an example for a front porch. So you have the dimension coming off the front porch for the footing. So he knows how to, what size the footing is going to be, because we've sized it correctly with our structural engineer. So we work in coordination with our structural engineer we give our structural engineer the whole design intent, all the loads from top down, so that our structural engineer can now size those footings depending on the loads coming down. So let's say, we know that there's, 4,000 pounds coming on that one footing. We're going to size that footing, say 2'6" by 2'6" by 1 foot deep, or so, number 4 rebars. There's a lot of information that goes into it. That's before there was a requirement, let's say, of an architect. The common thing was just oversize everything and just make things bigger. Another good example that actually, they say, things aren't built like they used to. It's not always actually even true too. Like you look at most garages, built in the early, 20th century, most of them have completely undersized foundations, footings, if anything, and they're all rotten and they're all tilted. So, that's the purpose of an architect. So the great builders, even in the past, they didn't have architectural plans, and there weren't so many things thought out like the footing. Sorry, got sidetracked. So back to the plan. So that's the foundation.
Footings were actually our major issue. I mean, I think Anthony can attest to how they didn't know the size, and the inspector came in and kind of like looked at them and said they looked big enough. But I think we had to redo our footings twice. So.
Yes, I mean, so the footings are a structural issue. So really technically by code and by, a town inspector, an inspector is just making sure that the contractor is following the plans. Like the plans are the instructions, just like IKEA instructions or anything else. These are the pieces and this is how you put it together. So the inspector's job is to make sure that the contractor is following the drawings. So when there's no drawings, there's no liability, so to speak.
Right.
The contractor cannot take design or structural liability. So that's the purpose of an architect from a structural standpoint. So, that's the inspector is. I don't know what he was really even inspecting, because he doesn't have the plans. So.
Good question. We don't really know either. No, I think that's a good point. And, for our situation, having never done the size exterior renovation on our own that we were doing, we hired a framer who, we had anticipated and trusted could kind of just, draw it out, get it done and get it approved. Unfortunately, he clearly didn't know what he was doing either. But I think a lot of homeowners maybe get into a situation, especially if they're new to renovating, where the GC will say, you don't need an architect, that wall doesn't really look load bearing, or, we'll just do this, this, and this. And they don't know the difference. And so they just get into a situation where maybe the inspector will come and say, you needed this signed off on by an architect. So, it's a situation that I'm sure a lot of people get into.
And, another good example in that is, if you're framing something pretty standard that a framer or general contractor does every day, they've seen the drawings. They know, all right, front porch, a good general contractor said, I've done this so many times, and, the footings are 2'6", 1 foot deep, 3 number 4 rebars each way. And that's, good practice, I guess you might call it, but it wasn't engineered. So that's a gamble in a way. So a lot of contractors and framers will say, oh, I do this all the time. But I've seen many times where you've done this all the time wrong. This is not right. This is not how you do it. So that's where things could go wrong. But, a lot of times they do get it right. Like the framer, for example, they know that they need hurricane ties to tie in, the joists to the roof rafters. But, sometimes, if there's, if you're in a strong wind location and you do have an open porch, but a typical framer is thinking about the loads coming down on a roof, but now you have wind loads that want to pick it up and lift up the roof. So that's something that requires totally different detailing. So, and it has to be engineered. So, not everything is always normal and straightforward, and things have to be thought out and designed as with code calculations involved.
And I would imagine that those are different in every state, correct?
Yeah, they're not even different state, but even region, right? So if you're on, we're in New Jersey, so if you're on the Jersey Shore or even on the Hudson River, you have different wind loads in those locations.
I've never even heard of wind loads. Didn't know that was a thing.
That's honestly the big thing, decks, porches, those are all the structural issues. Like you're like, just Google search it. Those are all the problems because people think, oh, it's a simple deck, it's a simple porch, but those are the most complicated ones because you have wind uplift coming up from underneath that could, lift it up. Or the other things, you could have a party on a porch on a deck, and now you went from, 2 people, 4 people in a living room. How many people you put in a living room? But now you can have a party on a deck, and then a deck collapse. Now you have
Oh my God.
really a lot of issues are in decks.
Yeah, I didn't even think about Anthony, are you listening?
Yeah.
I have a question from the chats. What comes first in terms of building elevations? Do you first lay out the interior walls and frame out and then set the exterior elevations?
So from a design perspective, it's all at once. So as an architect, we think three-dimensionally. So we're trying to design to make sure the exterior and the interior are both working together. An example of that might be, kitchen sink. You want the windows centered. So if you think just internally, you might have this kitchen sink window that looks beautiful in the interior, but now when you go to your exterior elevation, you're like, wow, like the gables here and the windows here. So it's all together. It's at the same time. So it's thinking three-dimensionally, and it's all being designed at the same time. So that's what I call the difference between a good architect and a bad architect. There's architects who draw and plan. Then there's architects who draw three-dimensionally, who are thinking cohesively about the entire design.
Interesting. Okay.
But as far, I don't know if you meant, so from a design perspective, that's the answer. But from a construction documents perspective, I guess we draw the exterior details first, then we start to get into the interior as far as detailing.
Gotcha. And that's probably also because, let me plug my computer in as I'm saying this. I would also, that's a good question too, just from a design perspective, sight lines too, right? Like you don't want to walk into a crooked window on your staircase, or just a random window on the facade that lines up to nothing else on the interior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And another even more example is landscaping. You might want to tie in, the front door. When you open the front door, you might want to have that window on the other side of the house that looks to a focal point in the landscaping, or to a pool or something outside. So it's even more than just the architecture.
Cool. Okay. And Jose says, that's what I meant. So cool. Okay. Terry's on, and Terry has another question. What was one of your challenges in a residential renovation, and how did you address this?
Challenge in renovation. So I would say the common, I'll just say the common challenge in a renovation is you don't know what you don't know. As an architect, you always want to try to probe. You want to cut holes and try to understand the structure. So recently, we did a project, and we did a probe, saw that the joists were going in this direction. So it was safe to say that one wall was load bearing. And then sure enough, when we completed demolition, it was framed in a total bizarre way. So that where we probed, the joists were going this way, but then another direction they're framed that way, which made completely no sense. So construction framing had to stop, and we had to re-engineer this house as quickly as you could to keep the construction process going forward. So that's always, in general, the difficulty in doing renovations is the structure and trying to understand the structure. It's we don't have X-ray vision, so it's you try to assume, and I don't like that word assume at all, but we always say, if we're going to assume, we will be very clear on our drawings. Assume 2x10 joists is 16 inches on center. If it's not, please call us right away, and we'll address that right away. If for some reason we can't get to the structure, if the homeowner won't allow us to cut holes. So those are always the challenges of, what's unseen that we can't see. But, and the more years that we've done it, I think you see more and more of the common, I should say the common, but, there's crazy things in framing, and you start to learn more about how they used to frame back in the day, and you can kind of expect that stuff more and more.
Framing is probably, and I told Anthony this was one of our greatest challenges, because I don't have a formal background in interior design, so I'm not classically trained to kind of understand what the underpinnings of a space should look like. So one of the things that I've always found fascinating is how someone could come in and kind of look at a a gutted wall and be like, needs support, this needs to be sistered, this needs a new beam, yada, yada, yada. But getting someone in like yourself who knows, you know, what it's supposed to look like is, you know, probably the first thing they should be doing.
Yeah. You should sign up for my master class. I teach that.
Oh, do you? How to frame.
For, you know, interior design architect or master class. So.
Yeah, I'll have a master class on how not to do an exterior.
Yeah, it's funny too how sometimes I meet with homeowners who are so confident, like, yeah, that's not a load-bearing wall though. I want to remove that wall between the kitchen and the dining room. Like, that's definitely a load-bearing wall. I don't know how you're so confident, because I'm an architect and I get nervous sometimes just assuming something like that. But yeah, it's not always so easy. You know, there's general rules, not to get too technical, but you know, you have your gable like this, and typically your floor joists are going the direction of the gable because it helps tie the gable in, right? Okay. So most of the time you assume the joists are going in this direction. There's some houses we've worked in, they were going the other way for some reason. Sometimes there's reasons, and it's like it's like general rule, like 101, you frame this way. And it wasn't. So, and that was a surprise. So the only way you can truly know if something is load bearing is seeing the structure.
So that was actually, we have Kristen here from Avenue Residential, and she said, what's the best way to tell if a wall can be removed to make for an open floor plan, short of opening the wall, of course? So.
Like I said, the best way is just to probe. Absolutely, just probe.
And when you say probe, you mean like
cut a hole.
Cut open.
Yeah, cut a hole and see the direction of the joists. If the joists are bearing on that wall, so if we have a wall here and I cut a hole and the joists are going in this direction, the joists are resting on that wall. If your joists are going parallel to that wall, there's a chance that it's not load bearing. So this is one side of the wall. So now maybe on this side of the wall, maybe these joists are going perpendicular and are resting on that wall. So you have to probe both sides, cut holes on both sides of the wall to see which direction the joists are going in. But now that also does not mean that it's definitely not load bearing. And that's something where another surprise can come up is maybe you have a point load, maybe you have a roof above that. So maybe the joists aren't resting on it. So when I say joists, if we're on the first floor, the second floor is be resting on the wall. But if it's not, you could also have a point load, and a point load is, you know, could be a 4 foot by 4 foot point that's supporting a roof, and that could be on that wall. Inside that wall could be a column that you don't know about. So you don't
have to open up the wall.
You don't know 100% until demolition is complete.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't know if that's the best answer I can give her. You know, sometimes you see like a contractor will just like bang on the wall, see if they feel the vibration, because if there's a lot of weight, it might sound sturdier, more firm. Okay. Do not do that method.
I was going to say, does that work?
You could have a good idea, but you're not going to like bet on it. I mean, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think pretty much everybody I know who has done a kitchen renovation has basically planned to open up a wall between their kitchen and some other room. Yep. 9 times out of 10, are you just kind of adding a steel beam? Like, is that the solve most of the time?
We always try to avoid steel. It's always rule number 1. We always try to design without steel, obviously, because it's an extra trade you have to get involved, and it's more coordination, more fabrication off-site that could add to the schedule and obviously adds to the cost. And not only that, but when you have steel too, now it gets more complicated for plumbing or electrical. So now if we design a flush beam and you have, you know, some electrical lines and you've got a steel beam, you've got to coordinate or actually drill some holes, so it gets more complicated. So we always try to avoid steel. I just remember the project we worked on together, the other Ridge Road project, right? There were some surprises on that, in that kitchen renovation, right? So we were correct in determining that was a load-bearing wall, but then there was a surprise with the bathroom, compromised the floor joist above that, and there was basically like almost nothing that could be down.
Yeah.
We had to add. There was no choice, but because it was so shallow, what we had to work with, there was no choice, but we had to add steel. So that's basically the rule of thumb: is if you have depth, the more depth you have, the more advantage you have of using wood. the shallower it gets, you have to go to a heavier steel.
I see. Okay. Interesting. Good to know. These are good, like, little tips for a homeowner to kind of just be aware of in case a GC just says, well, I don't know actually that many GCs that prefer just to throw in a steel beam versus.
And that's good. That means you're dealing with good contractors. The
Yeah.
contractor is telling you, don't worry, I got this. Those are the ones you want to stay far away from.
I know a few of those.
Yep, met a few myself.
Yes. So speaking of the steel beam and the project we worked on together, that included myself, general contractor, and yourself as the architect. So we had a full team on that job. I don't know if the bulk of your work is done as you are solely the architect or it's a mix. But I find that if we can all come to the table together as an A team, you know, designer, architect, GC, you get a really good product. At least I like to think so, as long as we're all getting along. And I think Jen's project on Ridge Road was a really nice example of that. But how do you, or I guess, what do you usually envision or kind of lay out as your roles and responsibilities when it comes to a full team of a designer, a GC, and you as the architect?
Well, first I want to answer somebody's question just popped up there and I said, am I drinking iced tea? So I guess I did after, but no, I'm drinking a cocktail. It's called the Golden Beer.
I was so stressed about that.
I was reading, like, iced tea. I was like, where do people look like tea? I'm like, oh. So yeah, to go back to that project. So those are the ideal projects, right? People always ask me, what's the ideal project? When do you bring in contractor, interior designer? The answer is always like the more, the better. If you know, depending on the scale of the project, if you can bring in the interior designer, that's the best. You know, we love as architects, I'm speaking to myself, I enjoy working with the design team, full design team, whether it's a lighting consultant, interior designer, landscape architect.
Lighting consultant. I haven't worked with one of those yet.
It's great to work together so that the design is cohesive and everybody's on starting from the beginning, working towards the same goal and direction. So that was great about, you know, the project we got to work on together. So, and then the contractor as well. So a lot of times people might not want to bring the contractor in early because, you know, they want to do the bidding method. But, you know, if you can do a negotiated contract or a cost plus contract, that's always great because now the architect and the interior designer can focus purely on the design and just say, all right, contractor, this is what we're proposing so far, you know, piecemeal, you know, little by little, are we within budget? Are we within budget? And if there's long lead items, you know, maybe you can order something early. So it's always great working on projects with a full design team. Did I answer your question?
It did. I think, so I had Jen on, who was the client for the Ridge Road project. And I think when we originally were all talking about our roles and responsibilities, I think she was concerned that there was a lot of us involved. Overlapping responsibility.
Yeah, good point. So that's a very good question. So I want to say unfortunately, I think fortunately there's a good point to have the architect and interior designer have a little bit of overlap. There's obviously, you know, it's all about relationships. So obviously, you know, everybody's want to have a little bit more of the pie than maybe you should, but, you know, it's great. I want to do the architectural interior. I want to do the architectural trim work, woodwork. And then, you know, but now that trim work has to coordinate with, you know, are we doing wallpaper in that room? So I'm not going to pick out wallpaper. So, you know, Jaclyn, what's your thought on this room? Are we going to do wallpaper? Because if we're going to do wallpaper, then I'm not going to do some elaborate paneling. So, you know, that's why there definitely is, I would say overlap. There's overlap in the room, so to speak. So we're going to pick the dining room, for example. We need to talk early to decide what that decision is going to be before I start designing it one way and you're designing another way. And that's why I like to work with a designer early on, because if I'm going to do this whole architectural interior package, and then all of a sudden there's no molding and it's all, you know, wallpaper and faux finishes, what's the point? So, and unfortunately, I do see that a lot. You know, interior designers hired later on.
Yeah. I think what was nice about Jen's, there was like two things that I think collaborated on as a full team, which was the bar area. I think we were all back and forth about what those upper cabinets would look like once we added drawers or doors or whatever that was. And I remember Jen had an idea for like this kind of little garage door mechanism. And we were, You guys were like, no, we're not.
That's what yeah, that's actually when it's easier. It's nice when you're just like, look, I don't like it. She doesn't like it. He doesn't like it. So
Yeah.
do what you want. Yeah.
And
So
then
it's a lot easier when it's just one person trying to make something.
that, and I think like as the trying to be the creative person, I could kind of see all of those options, from a design perspective. I think different things can work, but it's nice to have someone like yourself who's just like, from an architecture perspective, like, this isn't going to work. It's not going to look good. Like, let it go. And also just the beams on her ceiling. I remember we had this whole discussion about how the trim was going to work, because I really liked the idea of things kind of coming up and over onto the ceiling, but then we were running into an issue with all of I guess it was the horizontal coffered parts of the ceiling that just were not going to line up. So
Yep.
it kind of required all three of us to look at a set of plans and decide from a visual perspective what was going to work, but also from an architectural and like a construction standpoint, what was going to be the best answer for that.
Yeah, exactly. Another good point is that we had some issues with trying to get this grid to align. So we came up with the idea to split it up. But even splitting it up, now, we needed the contractor to give us some advices, with these beams, because some of them the grid was actually hiding some structural beams. So how do we now relocate plumbing and electrical? So
yeah, and I think that was the issue, because we opened the wall in between, but we still had like this header. So it was like we had this weird header and then like some beautiful trim work that wasn't going to align. So
yeah,
good times.
no, that was a great project though. Again, it's great to collaborate together with
Beautiful.
designers.
And for those who are following us on Instagram, I posted that yesterday. So that was that project. So everyone can see the beautiful grid that you did. All right. So we have two more questions. I'm actually going to read Jose's first. So would it make sense to have the architect, framer, designer, and project manager / GC walk through the whole build prior to starting? Yes. Should an extra charge be expected from these trades to walk through a project?
Well, I would say actually a good GC could handle the framer's job of understanding. I don't think the framer is really required. A good GC can do the walkthrough for the framer. I don't think a framer is absolutely
involved. That's true.
Required. Yeah, I think a good GC who understands basic framing can do that walkthrough.
Yeah. I mean, if the architect, the designer, and the GC, and it says project manager, but I guess project manager would be a nice to have too. But I think if the GC has a good team, they would be relaying that information, I guess, to the project manager. But I haven't seen, sometimes I guess I see a GC and a project manager come to a job site together, just because the project manager is kind of like taking the notes and deciding on action items and making sure everyone's aligned. But I definitely would say at a minimum, the architect and the GC.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I'm not even, before I did design build, our drawings, a big question people ask me, what's the difference between you and another architect? So it's like, well, we think about the project down to the constructability of things, so on our plans, you will see, we get asked this question, what's this dash toilet? Like, there's no toilet in the kitchen. Like, no, that's a toilet above. And what we're doing is we're trying to coordinate and figure out how are we going to drain that waistline of that toilet. So we're designing the structure, we're designing the architectural trim work, and we're designing this toilet waistline. So, that's a good architect really should catch, especially in new construction. But a renovation, even a good architect can handle a lot of the walkthrough, issue. Pre-construction should be able to be handled even by a good architect.
Yeah, and there's a question about just asking if there should be an extra charge to be expected. I kind of feel like that's baked in. I mean, me personally as a designer, my time to project manage is already paid for by the client in some sort of respect in terms of a retainer or project management on the design side. I call it design management. I don't know how architects generally charge, but that would be included in the design fee before we did anything, but maybe we can just clarify what that is. I mean, I don't know how you guys charge, and I don't know if we want to get into that, but would you be charging for a walkthrough, I guess?
So for consultations, yeah, we typically do charge, but in our, specifically, I think to that matter, I think what we call it, it's a pre-design phase where we'll come to if it's a renovation addition, we're going to come out, measure the house, photograph the house, and we're going to do our investigative work. And that's included in our fee, the pre-design.
Yeah.
So we're going to, see where all the toilets are and see where the waistlines are, see, what.
You have to map that all out.
Yeah, exactly. We're there. We're documenting everything we possibly can. So that's included in our fee.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Terry has a good question, but I'm gonna wait until we're kind of done because that's a good one to wrap up. So, I had a question for you. Do you prefer renovations or new builds, and why?
New builds, because a lot of times, not that I don't enjoy renovations at all. I love renovations because they feel a bit more investigative, and it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy it. But a lot of times in renovations, it's a what I call a match existing project. So there's already an architectural language that you're matching. So there's not as much of a blank canvas. Whereas a new home, there's everything from picking out the roofing material to picking out the architectural trim work to picking out the wood floors. Where in renovation work, it's match existing, but it's a lot of more coordination. It's a lot more of being the problem solver architect. A lot of renovations that we do. Obviously, if it's we're working on one really cool renovation. Actually, I'm sorry, it's an addition, but working on an addition where it's a beautiful old Tudor home. And I told the client, like, look, it's gonna be very difficult to match this brick and timber and stucco, everything on this old home to do this addition. So you're open doing a completely modern addition. So the original home reads as itself. You can tell when that was built, and we're gonna, protrude out with this new modern addition. So it's clearly gonna read to itself like that's the original, and this is an intentional new build on the addition. That's really fun, and that's very challenging to be able to tie in something new and modern with a historical old home, and how do you kind of respect it.
Yeah. What's like maybe the top things that let's stick to like top 2 things that you see when you're renovating an old home, because that's kind of all Anthony and I do. And I feel like there's like probably 3 or 4 things that we always see that will always be an issue. So now we just have to like constantly think about that, like upgrading electric and all of that stuff. What do you usually see from an architectural perspective that's like the top 2 issues when renovating an old home that people need to think about?
Definitely electrical and plumbing for sure. All the systems, plumbing, electrical, and mechanical.
Do you just assume that they're all bad?
Yeah, it's not even as bad. It's just modern necessities. Just more. When the house was built, there was no air conditioning loads. There was no computer loads, TV loads. So obviously electrical needs to upgrade for that. And then plumbing, the lines are just old and some of them are corroded. Insulation is the big one, obviously. So, in an old home, they weren't building tight houses. So, depending on your budget, if you really want to build an energy efficient, comparable to a new home, that's the big thing, is how do you make an old home energy efficient? So that's something that I enjoy, and I really like to try to see how we could always accomplish in a renovation, is how do you try to make it as efficient as a new build?
Yeah. Are you still using the spray insulation, or is everyone kind of going back to I don't know what the term is, but the old?
I use spray bat insulation. There's blown in insulation. So I like to use closed cell spray insulation. It's obviously very expensive, but it's night and day. So I really like closed cell. You'll always have mixed feelings out there when you get to do some research. But so far I haven't had any problems with it. And it's airtight. So on a renovation, it's great because, even on a new home, you have plywood sheathing on the outside, and you'll have, a self-adhered membrane that's also sealing the house. Or in an old home, there's, 1x8, 1x10 strips. The whole house is a leak,
Right.
Orient Way reno I did, we took out, the whole interior. You saw daylight everywhere in the whole house. So we sprayed the entire house. And it's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, last question is from Terry. What project have you worked on that was a lot of fun to do?
I would definitely say the project we worked on was a lot of fun because there was the whole, again, there was a team. I would definitely say, as far as like system, that was the most fun, right? Because it was a full team early on in the project. I really enjoyed that. Trying to think of it as maybe another one, because we already talked about that. To be honest, unfortunately, a lot of the most fun ones are the ones that haven't gotten built. and not for reasons of budget or just one couple move to a business move or something. But yeah, I still have to say, I guess just the one we worked on together was the most fun, just because of the design team, or not the design, the whole team putting together.
Yeah.
Early on, definitely, I would say that was the most fun. Sure.
Yeah, it definitely was like the project that went the smoothest, I think, from my own personal experience. Like there was definitely between, I guess, the GC and I, there was definitely like some overlap of communications and who's really dealing with the client, because, Zach, he's very hands-on, and I'm used to a lot of contractors not being very hands-on. So that was interesting, an interesting dynamic. But you guys made it easy. I mean, your drawings were great. We had no issues. The cabinets were through you guys, so we could customize to anything we wanted.
Yeah, it was great. I guess there's another project that just came to my mind too, is our Cliffside Contemporary. It was a very modern house, so it's not every day that we get a client who's open to doing something completely new and different.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of fun because that was very inventive and creative in all ways. And where it was a lot of fun is even, from the build aspect, dealing with our trade contractors, just saying, why are you doing this? Like the board form concrete, like I could just, get boards and we could pour this whole thing. Like it's kind of fun even dealing with the trades, some of the trades who are just like, I do this every day and I've never done this before. Like that's what excites us.
Yeah.
Doing something different. So, we did that.
Contemporary, you also, I think you have that tagged on Instagram, right?
Yeah, Cliffside Contemporary. Yeah. Unfortunately, we haven't had that photographed yet, and I don't see us photographing anytime soon now. But we have some during construction photographs at the house. But yeah, we did a board formed concrete. So if people don't know what that is, you're taking the form of the boards, the 2x6s that are laid horizontally as the formwork, and then you pour the concrete and you rip off the 2x6s, and then you have these beautiful lines, grains from the woodwork. It came out really beautiful, and it was a challenge. It was first for us structurally. Everything. There's a lot of just coordination from the construction standpoint, running our conduit in there, and how do we get the ties so they don't rust? There's a lot of research, and that was really, really fun. That to me is like a true architectural project. Just so much research for us on that project. It was really challenging and a lot of fun.
Why did you use the board form concrete? Just
it was an appearance. So we wanted, if you just did your typical boards for concrete, it would just look like a sterile wall. So, by using the 2x6s, it creates this nice rhythm and lines that are scaled with the home, as opposed to just like, it would just look like a, 14-foot mass concrete wall. But now we broke it up. So now it's more scalable in that scale, in the 2x6s. It was really nice. Cool. Yeah, but all like the mates are like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that before, actually. Is it on your Instagram under the Cliffside Contemporary?
Yeah, it should be there. If it's not, I'll make sure it's there, but no, I'm pretty sure it's there.
Upload it after this interview. Cool. All right, well, those are all my questions. Any other thoughts that you maybe wanted to share with people about what you do and why you love it?
Always hire an architect. And again, if it says, people, I guess the big thing is people always think, oh, I can't afford an architect. It's all service level. We could be extremely expensive if the scope is a lot, but if we could adjust to your budget. So, obviously if we can't, do the full package of architectural, it's something, like I said in the beginning, about something as simple as windows. Like I love selecting windows. And it's just could be as simple as just me reviewing a window order, so never be intimidated by an architect. I hear that all the time. Like, I was scared. I didn't want to call an architect. I couldn't afford one. Did you call any? No. I was like, it doesn't hurt, even just for a conversation. Mm-hmm. It could be some simple advice and that's it. So if you're doing exterior renovation, New Jersey just passed a law recently. Roofing and siding doesn't require a permit. So if it doesn't require a permit, it also might mean that someone's less likely to even hire an architect. Mm-hmm. If you're going to do some siding work, there's still, that's a lot of architecture, the siding, the trim work, the fascia, the cornice,
especially if you're working on a old historic home that you want those details to either be mirrored or you have a new idea for details that you want to look good. Like we did the ram's head or the
ram's crown,
pediment, but that and the historic sill, And, that took a little bit of figuring out as to how that was all going to be set up and laid out without looking stupid. So,
Exactly. So it's like as simple as, it could be something where I sketch it out for you, or it's as simple as I just review it for you, so it's never too small or too big.
Yeah, agreed. Well, where can we, what'd you say it?
You can't afford not to hire her.
He just said,
Right.
can't afford not to hire an architect.
That's definitely my, if I had a sales pitch, that would be my sales pitch is, well, you're so expensive. Well, wait until you get into construction, because as you just said, like if you're not hiring an architect who's thinking of all the potential change orders that some contractors might hunt, and I don't want to sound like, scare everybody away, but there's a lot of contractors out there who are intentionally hiding things, who know that there's going to be an unforeseen that they're predicting. Well, as an architect, my job is to protect the homeowner from these change orders. So a lot of renovation work we do, as I was saying before, like assume this, and if it's not this, put a price on this or put an alternate on this. So we're protecting the homeowners so that, now you're not stuck in a contract and now all of a sudden, cha-ching, contractor's got a change order. I'm here on the job site and I'm going to jack this price up threefold. So whereas on our drawings, we're going to make sure that if it's something we don't know, we can't predict, we're going to put something on there so the contractor has to assume something.
Yeah.
So the cost of the goal is that it still fits within the client's budget.
It's also a good point too, like if you want something done correctly, right? So if you're a stickler about things being done a certain way, even if you're not going to see them, like for example, the footings and the structure underneath our porch, you're never going to see, where all the cement footings were poured after the landscape and everything's done. But in the back of our minds, it's a detail that we want to make sure was done correctly, because that's just the way that we are as people who renovate homes and like to do things the right way. If you don't care too much about those things, then it's not much of a priority. But I think what we realized is, well, we didn't think we needed an architect. Those details, it would have been nice to have called someone like you to say, hey, like, is he doing this right? Like, is this how he was supposed to be tackling it? We just want your eyes on something. It's just good to have, a professional licensed person's eyes on something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Structural is definitely the basic and the easy one. And yeah, it's huge. For sure. Good point. Well said.
All right, next time, maybe I'll have you drop off the Negroni mix.
Maybe I'll just drop it off in Elisa's
on my porch.
Yeah, I'll put it in Elisa's stroller. She'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're literally right around the corner. Okay, so we can find you. You have a few Instagram accounts, but RS Mannino is the architecture.
Yep, that's me.
You guys have Mannino Builders.
Yep.
As well, and Mannino Cabinetry is the
our hashtag, or I'm sorry, our name is actually Mannino Cab. Not to make it too long. Yeah, Mannino Cab. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a good follow. You guys are published, and you're in all the local New Jersey magazines. You have a great team. I've worked with them in the past. So if anyone has any questions or wants to follow RS Mannino, and then Rosario's in there in a variety of places. So
thanks. We enjoy working with you as well.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Thank you everybody on the Zoom for asking questions. You guys are awesome. Thank you, Rosario. I appreciate your time, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you so much. You too, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.